It looks like the Secretary of Defense is under fire from politicians that are on this military committee from Congress looking to approve the new budget for the Department of Defense. And it looks like they are attacking Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin over the woke nature of the military and questioning where the money's going to go to, and is pretty much trying to see if he's saying that they will defend woke type mentality throughout the military. Now, there are a couple things I have to preface this entire video. Matt Gaetz is a Republican. I have no idea even which state at this point. Doesn't really matter because he doesn't represent me. On top of that, that's not political. I'm fact-checking a little bit and looking for context because a lot of people in the military sphere were talking about this, and it's relevant to know where military spending and military money is going to be going. Now, this congressional hearing was over the proposed budget, which is being proposed by President Biden
for $773 billion.
And mind you, there's criticism that it should actually be more because of inflation over the past year. But let's get right into the video right here.
Secretary Austin, why should American taxpayers fund lectures at the National Defense University that promote socialism as a strategy to combat China?
It's the National Defense University is an academic institution, and I don't know of any such lecture. But
well, that's surprising because it was widely reported. The National Defense University had Thomas Piketty come, and this was the title of his lecture, Responding to China, the Case for Global Justice and Democratic Socialism. So now that you know that they did this, would you agree that embracing socialism is not an effective strategy to combat China?
So to set this up in your mind, Lloyd Austin has no idea about what this course is, what he's talking about, and has never seen the information to verify or anything like that. He is literally only hearing this information from Matt Gaetz, and he's being expected to make an opinion or make a stance.
Well, I certainly don't agree with embracing socialism. I think
so that means...
I'm sorry. We're not going to do this. We're not going to let the guy say 4 words and still talk and then cut him off. We're just not.
I control the time, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, but you also have to be fair to the witnesses.
No, but I got the answer I wanted. I have a follow-up. My follow-up question is if we don't embrace it, then I guess why did the National Defense University put out a statement? Again, this is funded by U.S. taxpayers, saying in this talk, Mr. Piketty will argue that the right answer lies in ending Western arrogance and promoting a new emancipatory and egalitarian horizon on a global scale, a new form of democratic and participatory, ecological, and post-colonial socialism. So why would we invite people we don't agree with to evangelize views and values that we don't share at the National Defense University when we should be learning strategy about how to combat our enemies and make assessments that are accurate?
At this point, yes, I personally, on my own opinion, agree with the Secretary of Defense. Yeah, no one really, for the most part, would say wants socialism, I would say, in a generality of America. There is obviously a subsection of people that do, but overall people don't. As much as I have my own personal views on universities and what they teach, I do understand that the point of going to college or a point of going to a certain place is to have exposure of ideas and developing things from people that are already in the industry that probably have become professors. But there's more to this than what Matt Gaetz is saying, which is actually a lot more relevant and a lot deeper to this story than anyone would like to believe. And that's because this speaker is a French economist, which has also talked about the social impacts of that. And if you want to fight on this hill and look at current events that are happening, Ukraine and Russia have shown that sanctions and various other things, economics are going to play a role in any war no matter what. Now, if it's based off a socialist or based off the idea that you have some kind of capitalist structure in place, it's going to be affected, and studying that might be relevant. What Matt Gaetz does not mention in this entire spiel of him trying to pretty much poke at Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is the fact that the video that he's talking about was, or the class or whatever he was talking about, was actually a one event over a Zoom call, which the video only has 256 views on it. So it's not like this is like a astronomical video, tons of money is going into it. I would say it's very minimal at best. And my question is, did Matt Gaetz even watch this video because of the fact that it has so few views, right? Like, it's obviously not really made a stink, but I digress.
And we do learn a lot about strategy and about the military and about joint force development And so that is our focus in these institutions. I don't know what the context of this particular or content of this particular speech was.
Mr. Secretary, I've shared with you the context. The context wasn't better understand socialism so we can defeat it. The context wasn't learn about it so that we can offer countermeasures. The concept was that it's time for socialism. And the reason I know that's the context is because the lecture was pulled from a book written by Thomas Piketty entitled Time for Socialism. And I just can't help but notice.
And so your question was whether or not we...
I control the time.
Your question
You guys have
was
been
whether
blowing
or not
a
we
lot of
embrace
calls
socialism.
lately on
The
matters
answer
of
is no.
strategy, Mr. Secretary. You guys told us that Russia couldn't lose. You told us that the Taliban couldn't immediately win. And so I guess I'm wondering, what in the $773 billion that you're requesting today is going to help you make assessments that are accurate in the face of so many blown calls?
And so I give you guys more context than what Matt Gaetz said. According to what is posted on the military university's page, it says this: Thomas Piketty argued that Western countries are struggling to collectively define their political attitude towards China because of their obsession with capitalism. Instead of focusing on a conventional model of capitalism, he suggests the U.S. and Western countries pursue increasing the share of income and wealth over the socioeconomic spectrums. This could be done by increasing taxes on the wealthiest individuals, increasing the inheritance tax, and always keeping workers' rights as a priority over corporate profits. I don't think that's something crazy to really say. Now, the methods of if he wants to be a socialist or some other way of doing that, I mean, it sounds pretty understandable. What a lot of people have agreed with, that there has been a generational wealth gap since the 1980s, and he's talked about that in several other. He's saying that we should use some kind of method to distribute wealth to the middle class more than what we have. And just so you guys understand what this university does, and you guys grasp it, the National Defense University educates joint warfighters on and other national security leaders in critical thinking and the creative application of military power to inform national strategy and globally integrated operations under conditions of disruptive change in order to prevail in war, peace, and competition. So this guy is French. He's from another country. They're trying to share ideas and kind of bounce these off each other, which I'm also going to get into that because this is not like a rampant issue from what I've seen across other events that they've actually had over there. So here is the events tab for it. The avoidable war, the dangers of catastrophic conflict between the U.S. and Xi Jinping's and Xi's China. How conflict shaped us. Defense strategy and strategy of denial. Now, there is his article, right, and what this French economist is talking about, but that's one of, keep going down. How can the DOD catch up with the CCP? So, the Empire versus the Federation, competing visions of world order, national security in a digital world. So my thought process on this is, yes, you can pluck this one thing out and be like, is this what we're putting our money to? But it looks like this military university is actually looking at different types of warfare, whether it be economical, whether it be digital, whether it be kinetic, looking at these various spheres. And it's really not as bad as what Matt Gaetz has said. It looks like the university here as a whole, looking at several of these I'm scrolling through, have actually been focusing on China, on Russia, and actually looking at relevant issues. All right, so I did want to fact check is also what Matt Gaetz is saying here is the factor of he has a title here which says Time for Socialism. Doesn't go into the rest, dispatches from a world of fire. But I think to give context, you should also read some of the other titles that he's talked about and relevant things that have been kind of in the news or something that we might want to learn from. I'm not defending socialism here. I'm just saying there is context outside of this one degree right here where I'm like, let's not stare at the only tree in the forest. Let's pay attention to the forest as well. And the most recent one being the Western elite is preventing us from going after the assets of Russians hyper rich, which has been discussed in the news recently as it's like, yes, there have been oligarchs that have been getting some of their assets seized and things like that. But a lot of people are like, how can we mostly implement this or take power or control or influence Russia as much as possible? And even that book that Matt Gaetz is focusing on, which is titled Time for Socialism, I've looked at the most important piece of information that I would say from it. I'll link everything down below that you guys can check out. But it says that during this book, Piketty argues that the time has come to support an inclusive and expansive conception of socialism as a counterweight against the hyper-capitalism that defines our current economic ideology. These essays offer a first draft of history from one of the world's leading economists and public figures, detailing the struggle against inequalities and tax evasion in favor of a federalist Europe and a globalization more respectful of work and the environment. I don't see what's wrong with wanting balance and wanting some of the top elites. Like, I know everyone uses Amazon as that basis of comparison, but they haven't paid taxes, right? Whereas the average person doesn't have money to get out of every loophole and takes their standard deduction, right? I think we should add the context here. He's not advocating straight for socialism entirely. He's saying he thinks there should be a balance between capitalism, socialism, to reflect better the middle class here.
You've seen what's in our budget. You've seen how the budget matches the strategy, and so I'll let that speak for itself.
Well, I mean, I've also seen that we're
investment in
behind, Mr.
combat
Secretary.
capabilities.
We're behind in hypersonics. We failed to deter Russia. Last year,
So
China
what do you mean we're behind in hypersonics? How do you?
Okay, who's ahead in hypersonics?
How do you make that assessment?
I don't know.
Is
I
it
make
a
that
one for
assessment
one?
because
Is it a
China
one for
is
one
fielding
exchange or
hypersonic
development
weapon
of
systems,
hypersonics?
and we are still developing them. I
Are
make
you
that
talking about
assessment because
development of
Russia actually
capability
used
or
one.
development of-
By the way, your own people brief us that we are behind and that China is winning. Are you aware of the briefings we get on hypersonics?
I am certainly aware of briefings that we provide to Congress.
But it's not just the hypersonic. It's all over the world. It's in Taiwan, where China's last year flew more sorties than ever before. It's North Korea, on pace to shatter prior records, the number of missiles that they are testing. And so while everyone else in the world seems to be developing capabilities and being more strategic, we got time to embrace critical race theory at West Point, to embrace socialism at the National Defense University, to do mandatory pronoun training. Do you assess?
You know, it's again, this is the most capable, the most combat credible force in the world. It has been, and it will be so going forward.
Not if we continue down this path.
To do that.
Not if we embrace socialism.
The fact that you're embarrassed by your country. By
oh no! I'm embarrassed by your leadership.
I'm sorry for
I am
that.
not embarrassed for my country. I wish
It's
we were
what
not
you're
losing
saying.
to China.
It's
I
what
wish
you're
we
saying.
were. You know what? That is so disgraceful that you would sit here and conflate your failures with the failures of the uniformed service members. You guys said that Russia would overrun Ukraine in 36 days. You said that the Taliban would be kept at bay for months. You totally blew those calls. And maybe we would be better at them if the National Defense University actually worked a little more on strategy and a little less on wokeism.
Has it occurred to you that Russia has not overrun Ukraine because of what we've done and our allies have done?
But that was baked into your flawed assessment. That was baked into your flawed assessment. And so I saw that the Obama administration tried to destroy our military by starving it of resources, and it seems the Biden administration is trying to destroy our military by force-feeding it wokeism. I yield back.
He's kind of fumbling a little bit, but he still sticks back to the idea that there are people that have briefed him that hypersonic missiles are the only thing that were relevant as far as the DoD budget, which I will break that down because it's not really as relevant as you would think. And also, we must understand that the capabilities of our military are not based off just the missiles that we shoot. There are so many other factors as far as air warfare, at sea, submarines, and so many other things, which I find funny. It's like Matt Gaetz actually did not listen to his opening statements because it looks like Lloyd Austin actually agreed with him on this statement in his opening remarks.
Mr. Chairman, you've heard me say many times, we need resources match to strategy, and strategy match to policy, and policy match to the will of the American people. This budget gives us the resources that we need to deliver on that promise as well. It reflects our recently submitted national defense strategy, which highlights the pacing challenge of China. That's why we're investing some $6 billion in this budget in the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. And it's why we're realigning our posture in the Indo-Pacific toward a more distributed footprint. We're going to enhance our forward posture, infrastructure, presence, and readiness in the Indo-Pacific, including the missile defense of Guam. And it's why we're making broad investments in such key areas as undersea dominance, fighter aircraft modernization, and advanced weaponry, including hypersonic strike. And many of these investments will pay dividends in countering the acute threat of Russia as well, which our strategy underscores.
He doesn't really define what is woke other than the socialism thing. But, you know, we can only allude to what we're talking about, where we had the Army commercial where Emma had two moms, or we had the extremist training and things like that. And on top of that, I find it funny that we would expect Lloyd Austin to know about this one specific event that happened at a military college. Like, does he have the entire syllabus of every single degree program sitting in his room studying it, of what's being taught over at West Point or the Naval Academy? Like, this is just such a weird hill to die on right here. And I say that because the final point here that I want to make is the fact that they agree more than they disagree, right? And what I'd like to get at is some of the contracts that we're talking about from the military contracts that are out there have a way bigger piece of the budget, and everything else that the military buys is pretty much like a wedding contract. If you wanted to go get a photographer for the wedding, it's going to be hyperinflated and higher because it's a wedding. If you just wanted an all-day birthday shoot, it's a totally different price. Kind of the same thing for the military because they know it's a government contract. Secretary of Defense Austin says, "We are requesting nearly $56.5 billion for air power platforms systems, more than $40.8 billion for sea power, to include 9 more battle force ships and nearly $12.6 billion to modernize Army and Marine Corps fighting vehicles. We are requesting more than $130.1 billion for research and development in this budget, an all-time high, because we understand the need to sharpen our readiness in advanced technology, cyberspace, and artificial intelligence. Our budget requests $479 million to implement the recommendations of the Independent Review Commission on sexual assault, and our 4.6% pay raise for our military civilian personnel helps ensure they receive the pay they deserve and need, particularly in light of the challenging current economic realities. Our budget request also includes additional investments to provide affordable childcare for both our military and civilian workforce. For instance, we are making additional investments in childcare fee assistance for both military and civilian members." Now, looking at that, you realize we're talking about air, sea, all these other things that cyber and all that are looking at billions of dollars. When it came to people and focusing on social issues such as SA and things like that, it was literally $479 million. I've calculated. Out of the entire defense budget, it is 0.06%. I'm like, we should be looking at the bigger numbers here that are billions. How can we save money and get the best price for ships, aircraft, weapons, etc.? And I want to show this here because there's $7.2 billion investments being made to procure survival, precision strike, and long-range fires from hypersonic to subsonic across the joint force. So this is where I want to get to you guys. What do you think about this? Do you think the hill that Matt Gaetz died on is relevant as far as the woke culture that we're seeing or hearing about on social media and things like that? Or comparing to the other parts of the budget that I have and looking at this, do you think that there are other things that we should be focusing on?